I'd like to read this message from Paramhansa Yogananda. He wrote this in 1938 to all students and friends. Our old tutor of last year has just passed away. Let us all remember the valuable lessons that he taught us, and thus dedicate our future actions on the altar of the coming new year. Let us remember the dire discipline which we received as a result of our erroneous ways, and let us not repeat them on the sanctum of the new year, decorated with the fresh blossoms of our new hopes. Let us remember the joyous instructions and blissful experiences of the past year, and let us repeat them with greater intensity in the coming new year. Let us forget the sorrows of the past and make up our minds not to bring them back in the coming new year. With new determination and unflinching will, let us make up our minds to renew our life, our better habits, our successes in the temple of the new year. If the last year has been hopelessly bad, the new year must be hopefully good. Remember, no matter what our trials have been or how discouraged we are, if we will make a continued effort to be better and to succeed, we will find that, being made in the image of God, we are endowed with unlimited power, much stronger than our worst trials, no matter what they may be. Let us make up our minds that we will win, focusing all our concentration on the ceaseless efforts to succeed in the new year, and we will surely be victorious. Remember that our past difficulties did not come to crush us, but to strengthen our determination to use our limitless divine powers to succeed. God wants us to conquer the difficult tests of life and come back to His home of wisdom. Let us return in this new year.
And this is from the New Path, where Swamiji is writing about what it was like to have New Year's with Master. On New Year's Eve in 1948, we gathered in the main chapel for a midnight meditation, again led by Master. At one point during the proceedings, he beat a large gong, softly, then with gradually increasing volume, alternately decreasing and increasing the volume in waves. Imagine this as the sound of Om, he told us, spreading outward to infinity. At the same instant, 100 miles south in Encinitas, another group of disciples was meditating in the main room of the hermitage. They too heard the gong as Master was striking it. One of the monks later told me it was as though it was being struck in the hallway just outside the room we were in. The meditation that followed at Mount Washington was enthralling. Midnight came. Suddenly, waves of noise sweeping up from the city below and inward from the surrounding neighborhood. Factory whistles, car horns, shouts as countless celebrants ushered in the new year. The door of a neighboring house opened, and a voice with a tone almost of desperation shouted into the night, "Happy New Year!" What a contrast between the frantic, emotional, almost febrile excitement and the sounds that were being unleashed by the thousands of celebrants around us, and the calm, expanding soul joy we experienced in ourselves in the sublime peace of our little chapel. And how blessed, I reflected, how wonderful it was to be in this holy place at the feet of my divine Guru. I prayed that the new year would bring me an ever-deepening awareness of God's love. Happy almost New Year, everyone. It's so nice to see everyone here, so many, and it's wonderful to share this celebration together with such close spiritual family. We're just so thrilled, actually, about it. And you'll notice a lot of the theme around New Year's is success. You saw in the readings, Yoganandaji writes a lot about success. Swamiji writes a lot about success. And so we have to rethink, though, what is success for us? You know, I have a close friend who's part of Ananda in America. And one year, maybe by now it's 20 years ago, I don't know, but she got a very debilitating disease. It's called chronic fatigue syndrome. And in it, the more you try hard to do something, the more tired you get. And she was a very, what we would call type A person. Have you heard of this type A person? Type A is someone who is very achievement oriented. I got this done, I got that done. Highest grades in school. Everything she defined herself by was in her outward abilities. And she had many outward abilities, very talented. It's almost as though the more one is talented, the more one needs to challenge their sense of self-identification with what success truly is. We think if we're really talented, oh, if I can do this and that and this and that and this and that, then that means I'll just keep doing more of this and that and this and that, you know? And we can gain a real good outward sense of how accomplished we are and capable we are and competent and all those things. But then one little thing happens, a death or a small failure, and it's almost as though someone sticks a pin in a balloon, pop, and our whole sense of identity is gone. Because if it was all on this platform of outward abilities, then when one of the outward abilities falls or fails or goes away, then there's nothing left for us to identify anymore, because then we say, oh no, I was so horrible, I made this mistake, something wrong happened so badly. And so what my friend did, who was very much this way, and she was also a meditator, so, you know, she felt she was living a life of balance, of outward activity and inward, but this really challenged her self-identification. She could no longer do. She was, in fact, on some track to be a very important research librarian, who, in my world, I don't know anything about librarians, but for her, in her realm of her profession, it was a big deal what she was doing. She couldn't do that anymore. In fact, especially in the beginning of the illness, it involved long days of just laying on her back, trying to rest enough to be able to crawl to the restroom even. She was that debilitated. And it took many years of kind of trying to solve the mystery of her illness to be able to even be semi-functional. And it was God's grace that really supported her financially and everything through those especially more difficult years. And she became a motivational speaker, an inspirational speaker for others who had the same illness, and she even wrote a book about it. But it took her many, many years to be able to have the right point of view about the illness, the right way to look at it, to even be able to write about this. Because ultimately, an illness like that feels like a physical failure. Or, you know, as Master was talking about karma, you might think, what did I do? I must have done something that created this karmic situation, you know, how can I correct it? And even when we're in that mode, we're not accepting what's happened and working through it. And one might think, well, if I just use enough willpower, I'll be able to overcome the illness. You know, if I just do enough, I must not have been trying hard enough. But it's an illness that when the more you exercise, the more tired you become. It's like living in the opposite world. And so what she learned, she said, why don't you close that door also? What she learned is that she had to redefine what success was for her. Rather than identify it as I succeeded this highly in my profession, or I was able to get the 10 things on my list done today that I really wanted to get done. And instead, she started identifying her success as, how have I experienced God today? That is my success. Which aspects of God have I connected with today? What characteristics in myself have I improved today? Am I more compassionate? Am I more open-hearted to others? Am I less angry? These are qualities we want to cultivate as disciples, as spiritual aspirants. And so she really had to redefine her whole life in this way, and was able to write a book about it. And so we as disciples need to also rethink what is success. Swamiji wrote a book, actually a course, a business course called Material Success Through Yoga Principles. And I remember when he first wrote it, I thought, material success through yoga principles, what is this about? Swamiji, are you saying this is how we, start a business, and this is what we do in the business, and here's how I gain my material success so I can buy a house and a car and, kind of be better than my neighbor, and, all the things that came to mind about material success. But Swamiji, in his course, he redefined what material success actually means. He said material success is actually adhering to Dharma in your life. And by getting the inward parts of ourselves aligned in the right way, by being aligned with valuing how close we are with God, valuing what characteristics we're judging ourselves by in terms of inner characteristics versus out. He says all of those, when we're aligned, then it doesn't even matter if outward success happens, because the inside is all aligned already. And when we have our insides aligned in the way that we need to have them aligned, then we're in the flow of God's will. We also align ourselves with what does God want. And true success is following what God wants. And it's no small thing to tune into what does God want. It's different for each one of us. And one person can say, well, God wants me to, have this great job in a company, and God may want that. And another person will say, God wants me to, volunteer at the orphanage or something, and that's what God wants them to do. Neither one is better than the other. Sometimes people on the spiritual path think, oh, well, now that I'm on the spiritual path, I shouldn't have a big successful job anymore. But that is our own decision. That's not a decision based on what God tells us to do. Someone's got to be in charge of the big corporation. Someone's got to be the volunteer at the orphanage. It's all valuable. Everything everyone does is valuable. So we have to find the thing for us that's the best for us to do. And very often we're blocked by I want. But I want. And we're so busy saying I want, we can't hear what God wants. And aligning ourselves with God, what God wants, is what is going to lead us to success. And so it's so beautiful, actually. I've always felt aligning to God's will is much more interesting than aligning to our own will. Usually aligning to our own will, maybe we hear a hint of what God wants and we decide, then this is what He wants. Here comes the flower lady. You can pass it forward if you want it, and I'll put it on the altar. So I'm not going to talk too much longer because we have some more interesting things happening. Very beautiful. Thank you. Look how that all fits in with what your sister did already. Almost as though it was planned. The same DNA. So take some moments in this next week or month to tune in. What does God want for me this year? Very often, the new year begins with what? What do we do when we know the new year is coming? Resolution. How long do we succeed at the resolution? From now on, I'm going to fill in the blank. And then for a week, the steam is there. But then something happens, and the resolution goes downhill. Master said it's very important when we resolve anything that it has to be something attainable. And that if we go for something attainable, our willpower plus God, we can't forget God in the equation, will bring that to fruition. But if we just use our own willpower, and it's not something that every part of us is aligned with, then we'll fail. And when we fail, every time we break our will, it is not a good thing. We want to be able to have wins in our life. And Yoganandaji and Swamiji talk so much about how forget past failures. You know, and you can probably think of failures you've had not just this past year, but maybe 10 years ago. Are failures in your mind from before haunting you still? We want to let those go with an oomph of willpower. Master said to just face the year with, I'm done with any past failures. I'm only going to do positive future achievement. See the willpower required in that? There's willpower in saying no to the past failures. I don't define myself that way. And there's willpower in moving forward with the new achievement and the new energy that's happening. That requires willpower. This is why we energize. This is why we meditate. We are able to get that willpower through the techniques that are taught by Yoganandaji. So think about, actually we're having a retreat on Saturday, and we're going to go more into setting expectations for the year as we celebrate Yoganandaji's birthday. So we'll go a little bit more into that, but one of the things to do is to see how have we learned from any mistakes or failures we've had, and get that out of the way. If you need to think it through, then only go that far before you crush the failure of the past and move forward with the positive expectations of the year. And know also that the downward pull of the negative energies that exist on this plane, that exist in the material world, the downward pull, this is the direction of the base of the spine. This is the challenge of the human being, the upward pull and the downward pull in the spine. And that downward pull can align with the negative energies on the earth, and it wants us to stay on the earth. You know, Yoganandaji talked a lot about satanic power, and that the satanic influence wants us to identify with our body, wants us to identify with, our material world accomplishments, wants us to identify with that, wants us to say, you don't have to meditate now. You don't have to do any of these spiritual practices now. Forget about it. Sleep for 12 hours. Don't worry about it. But the soul wants to meditate. The soul wants us to achieve God consciousness. The soul wants us. So let's aspire in the direction the soul wants us. And if you've ever noticed, when you set a resolution that comes more from ego than from your soul, you can kind of feel a thickness about it. But as soon as you set an intention, like in a prayer, Divine Mother, help me to feel your love flowing through me more and more and more. And what you feel with a prayer like that, or any other kind of prayer, you feel a sense of grace going along with what you've prayed for. If it's just, Divine Mother, help me score really great on this test. I've got to get into this graduate school, or whatever it is. Okay, yes, you can do it in the right way to get attuned. Help me feel the answers from within, whatever you want to do. But that kind of a prayer versus asking to align more with the aspects of God, those types of things, you can really feel an upliftment that happens with that. And the more and more we feel that upliftment, the more we realize that we can believe that there really was upliftment there. That's part of where our doubts come in. We can't really believe fully that God is right there, Master is right there with his arm around us saying, yes, 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 that's what I want you to do, yes, yes. We can't necessarily see him. And if we're agitated or busy, we can't feel him or hear him either. So what we want to do, especially this year, is get in tune with being able to feel that divine presence. Then you can hear the divine presence, and it will guide you in every step that you take. And there's nothing more thrilling than living your life that way. It's a pleasure to be in partnership with God in that way. I don't mean equal in that way, but I mean asking God to come in as friend, having that continual sense of feeling connected, and that continual sense of feeling guided in every step of the way. Thrilling. It's a thrilling relationship. We get too busy and too agitated to feel it, but it's there always. So in this next week, in this next month, also I should say at the end of the month, Nayaswami's Jaya and Dhyanaji are coming, and they're going to do a big workshop on success. So they'll be going through it. So the theme for this month is success. But the theme for all of us is trying to figure out what that success is for us, and that success with God. Namaskaram.